testing, how you set up the null and alternate hypothesis.
Yeah, and like what they mean. So, because I'm really confused. I mean, I understand the homework, but I just don't know. I'm not quite understanding the statement on like, how do you know which statement goes with which?
Okay, let's see. We can create some questions and show you how you would do that. So they're going to be a story, and in that piece, in that story, there are going to be some pieces of information that will give you clues to what the null and what the alternative. So somewhere they want you to prove something. So what do they want to prove? So you might get a story like, is there enough evidence and then they finish off with a story. Now, whatever it is they want you to try and prove or find evidence is true, whatever that is, right? The bit that they said, is there enough evidence to prove that Scotsmen are heavier than 200 pounds? Is there enough evidence that the people who voted Democrat are less than the people who voted Republican? Is there enough evidence, blah, blah, blah. Whatever that is, that piece of information, that's your alternate hypothesis. So if they say, can you prove to us that adult males weigh more than 200 pounds in Scotland? Mu greater than 200. Can you prove that the percentage of people who like Pepsi is less than 50%? Can you prove that Americans drink less alcohol than Scotsmen? Americans, take away Scotsmen, for instance, that would be less than 0. Can you prove that the weight of Australian geese is different than the weight of American geese? So that might be mu1 is different. I'm just inventing stories off the top of my head, but all of them have one thing in common. There is something that you're trying to prove. And whatever that something is, that's what your alternate's going to be. Now, there are two pieces to a hypothesis test. There's the null hypothesis as well. Now, the null hypothesis is sometimes described as the status quo, which is nothing has changed. It's the same as it always was. I don't know what you're talking about. Now, if mu is greater than 200, the null hypothesis is going to be the same guy, but it's always going to be equal that number. So it doesn't matter if it's greater than, less than, or whatever, not equal to, whatever it might be, it's going to be the equal part. So if percentage is less than half, the percentage is a half. If the difference is less than 0, the difference is 0. If the difference in means is not 0, the difference in means is 0. Off the top of my head, if I went and said to you then, prove that P is greater than 0.75, right? You wanted to prove something was more than 75%. What would the null look like in that story? What would I write here?
Would it be the same?
With a greater than, or would it change?
It would change.
Okay, what would it change to instead of a greater than? What would I be writing over here?
Would it be an equal?
Yeah. Same? Have you noticed that every single, that's not a coincidence, that every single one of them is 0. So the null hypothesis always has a 0 in it. It always has an equals in it.
Okay.
And the alternate hypothesis is the thing you're trying to prove, but the alternate hypothesis always has a greater than, a less than, or a not equal to. It's got one of those three, always has. And both of them use the same number.
Okay.
And that's how I would, that's a kind of short description of how I would be able to look at a story and decide. Now, what happens is that you tend to get a lot of information in a story, and then it's that you can't see the forest for the trees. So I'm going to write down a kind of long-winded story to try and show you how that might work. So,
okay.
Totally made up numbers. In the year 2000, 45% of all penguins had left-handed tendencies. You never knew that penguins, just like humans, were left-handed or right-handed. And they probably aren't, but we're pretending this story there is. So in the year 2000, 45% of all penguins had left-handedness. A zoologist
12.
Right. So a zoologist believes that this has changed. No idea why that would be, I guess. But he believes it's changed. He took a sample of 900 penguins found 430 were left-handed. And here's the carrot in the tail. Is there enough evidence to prove that penguins have increased in left-handedness? At significance of right. And in some of the homework questions, it's even more wordy than that, right? But in all that writing with numbers and alphas and sigmas and 2000 and 900 and all sorts of other stuff going on, you're going to have to be able to start off by creating this fella, right?
Yeah.
So in all of that spiel that I've got here, what is, well, let's do the first decision. Is this story about new population means, or is this story about P, population proportions? Which is it?
Is it mu?
Is it? So you're saying it's mu population mean?
Mu.
Is it population P proportions or population mean mu? What is this story dealing with?
A sample of 900 penguins.
Okay. When you look at this story, you're going to have to do one or two decisions. If you can't get this part, then it's going to be a bit hard that you continue the story. Is it going to be mu equals something and then mu changes, and then is it P equals something or P and a difference? So is this information given in terms of proportion? Proportion is percentages or decimals, right? Mostly
Yeah.
percentages. Yeah. So that makes it this story.
Okay, so how do you know okay, my second question is how do you know if it's mu or proportions? Because that's
If they went and said in the year 2000 the average weight of penguins was 82 pounds, but we think they've got fatter now, and so he does a sample of 900 penguins and he found that their new mean weight was 82 pounds.
yeah.
You'd be seeing no real percentages anywhere. Do you notice that it's all about average weight of this, average weight of that, mean weight of this, mean weight of that,
Mm-hmm.
typical weight of a penguin, phrases like that. There wouldn't be any 42% of this or 45% of that. You wouldn't see that. But sometimes you don't even see percentages in the P guys. And that's because, well, you'd see at least one percentage, but you might get, as we did here, 430 out of 900. That's a percentage, or at least a proportion that could be converted to a percentage. That is 430 on the top out of 900.
Mm-hmm.
So if you see a percentage floating about as we do here, then think it's probably going to belong in this world. Since we have decided that that's it, what's the null and what's the alternate hypothesis?
The null,
Mm-hmm.
I believe. Isn't it 45?
Okay, and so as 45 goes, we do proportions in decimals. So it's that one.
Mm-hmm.
Now, which one is the alternate going to be? Well, isn't the alternate going to be bigger than, less than, or not equal?
It's going to
So
be
is it?
greater.
Right. And so I'm trying to find where I said that. There you are. The word increased.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how you set up the null and alternate hypothesis.